Mr. Mr. D.P. Dubey, Chief Information Security Officer, Reliance Group. Mr. Samir Ratolikar, Senior President and Chief Information Security Officer, HDFC Bank. Ms. Kalpana Maniar, Chief Information Officer, Edelweiss Securities. And Mr. Patrick Kishore, Chief Operating Officer, Institute for Development and Research in Banking Technology. The panelists have their agenda cut out. How organizations can develop comprehensive and cost-effective risk-managed resiliency frameworks, preparing employees at every level to identify and address cybersecurity breaches. The panel will be moderated by Shri Basant Shroff, Partner, Financial Services, Ernst & Young.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and honor to be here to be with the eminent panelists to discuss a topic around cybersecurity and need for an effective cyber ecosystem and talk about robust and cybersecurity mechanisms. Without taking much of your time, I'll probably start with Kalpana and kind of get your views on where do you think organizations are, what is the level of preparedness do we have from a cybersecurity standpoint?
Okay. I think cyber security, to my mind, is at a stage where most of our organizations are prepared with the basics. We are not there when it comes to advanced threats, handling and mechanisms. And I would like to differ, or I would like to be proved wrong, to be honest, because it's become very complex now, especially with the digital technologies, penetrating all our business models and the way we communicate and interact and transact. I think that the whole complexity is increasing tremendously. So to my mind, when I look back and when I see and review what is available and how prepared we are, I think it's very fragmented and it's not comprehensively handled. Having said that, is it that, why is that? Is it because there is not enough attention given at senior levels? I think the attention at senior levels is increasing. With the high-profile attacks that have come in now and everybody's attention being drawn, the senior management attention is getting focused on this. I think why, primarily so far, why we've not had focused attention and comprehensive approaches, because clearly, one, it is very complex. There is no single solution or which addresses all aspects, one. Two, the costs are generally, if we try and it's a part of IT division generally right now, and only businesses are getting into it more from trying to find out what is it that we can protect and how do we protect, but it's initial conversations. Primarily, things have not happened because traditionally technology looks at ROI, or the conversations with business is ROI based. So there are no tangible and accessible outcomes that one can actually quantify and provide. Two is the overhead that most of these solutions will provide to the existing BAU infrastructure and application stack. And that is a concern. And I see that those conversations also very, very prominent. And I think the focus so far has been on compliance and not on capacity building or capability building. So this is the current state, I would say. However, I think there is more awareness, there are more conversations, businesses are asking questions, they want to be involved and be a part of those conversations. So for example, in our company, what we have done is that now we have a technology risk committee, which has not only the CISO and the technology head, but also some of the leading business heads who feel that it is very important and critical for us to look at this risk. And they are a part of the forum. So it's starting.
I think you made a couple of interesting points around the Technology Risk Committee around the ROI, and I'll kind of expand those in a while. But let me move to Durga. Coming from a very diverse organization, pretty much you name an industry and you might have a pie in it. How do you think you are prepared, or your organization is prepared from a cybersecurity perspective?
Good. I mean, you actually set the context for me. Like we have a conglomerate. I mean, we represent the true representatives of an Indian society. Everything is there. I mean, we have companies who are not matured in IT. We have companies who are totally matured in IT. We have companies which are facing to the public. We have companies who are facing to the consumers, customers, all sort of things. So one of the basic fundamentals we follow is not that if somebody asks me that, are you protecting this company? I will tell, yes, I am protecting this company for sure, but I am also have another mandate to protect ourselves from you. So that's probably the fundamental of cybersecurity today. All of us should try to protect ourselves from others. So that's what is precisely done at our end. And coming to just another thing, that whether cybersecurity has reached the business or reached the C-suits or something like that, then I must tell that actually I have seen the evolution from EDP security to IT security to information security to cyber security. So to me, it really doesn't make any difference. The only difference is perceptively I feel that yes, everybody had started talking about information security. I still call it information security. Of course, there is a slight difference, and that difference is more academic than any other things. But that itself has a lot of problem. So just imagine, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of information security professionals here who are in the business of walking the talk. Just look at a situation when the CIO comes in the morning and asks you how many hits you have at the firewall today. What do you tell? You tell 1 million hits. Then he feels that 1 million hits, what has happened? How many from China? You tell 50,000 or 500,000 from China. It gets disturbed. Actually, all these things will create insecurity in the organizations. It doesn't create anything other than insecurity in the organization. So what is required is the awareness, not only with the public, awareness in the management, awareness everywhere, that what needs to be protected. That's actually the fundamental of cybersecurity. We should be very clear that what we are trying to protect. And another thing which is very, very important is, like, a lot of people are talking about vulnerability management. Believe you me, I am not concerned about vulnerability management. I am concerned about compromise management. I am not thinking whether I am vulnerable or not. I am actually interested to know whether I have been compromised or not. So when compromise become inevitable, and it can happen anytime, the one strategy which we should combinedly take care is something that we will certainly fail, but how we will quickly get up. And will not fail to get up. That's what is the strategy which we have been trying to follow.
Thanks, Durga. I think talking about saying we can't really prevent, but at least make sure that we react and get up very fast is the key. And then kind of talking about metrics and awareness, I think with a couple of points that we'd like to deal with a little bit more in detail. I'll probably move to Patrick. Patrick has been in the industry as a banking CISO, and then now in a research organization helping the banking community to get their technology adoption technology adoption and security posture better. So where do you see the preparedness of the industry?
Yeah. Basant, I must say that the banking industry has now become quite mature when it comes to implementation of security. If I remember going back right from 2002, 2003 onwards, banks have been working on this. Today, every bank has a CISO, long before it became sort of mandatory. Every bank has a very robust security policy, and they follow world-class standards and procedures. And I don't think I'll be wrong if I say that so far no bank has been hacked. No website of the bank has been hacked to steal information or money. Money has been lost by customers because of their own stupidity, I should say. So if somebody gives his user ID, password, his mother's maiden name and date of birth and everything to the first fellow who asks, I don't think banks are at fault. So it's more of a social engineering than a system vulnerability. So I would say that banks' present status of security is pretty strong. We need to keep improving on this. And this is where IDRBT has done a lot of work. For instance, now for the last 5 years, we have had a CISO forum of banks. All the CISOs of banks, about 50 of them, we meet once in 2 months to share our successes and pain points. We learn from each other, we learn from the industry. And it is because of this cohesiveness of the banking CISOs that we were the first to set up an information sharing portal. Today, all banks report their cybersecurity incidents to a common portal where other banks can learn. Like Mr. Berman was saying, if it happened to you, tell others. Like this is exactly what's happening today. So all the banks report voluntarily and anonymously, because again, there's a question of reputation. So I would say that banks are fairly well ahead when it comes to implementation of information security and quite prepared for cyber attacks. Incidentally, IDRBT, we also conduct cyber drills for groups of banks, so that again, bank is a learning exercise.
Thanks, Patrick. Over to you, Samir, last but not the least. But I wouldn't ask you for preparedness because I think Patrick has said you're very mature. Let me give you a slight twist to that. We are seeing a lot of phishing and wishing and a number of attacks, to the extent that we are seeing attacks on banking system, particularly where the criminals have got a lot more data. So for example, yesterday I got a call where somebody gave me my mobile number, my name and my date of birth, and was asking my 16-digit card number. And well, if I wasn't aware and if I wouldn't have kind of understood and kept my antennas up, probably as a naive customer, I would have probably given it off, because the level of detail that they had was quite a lot. So if I look at in the changing scenario where threats are becoming different, sophisticated, how do you cope in the banking system and from a financial services sector in general?
Yeah. So we need to understand one thing very clearly. If you analyze the last decade, right, say for example 2004 to 2005 to 2015, we were typically on banking 1.0 kind of scenarios 10 years back, where traditionally brick and mortar banking was more dominant, right? Then look in 2010, 5 years from 2005, and we felt that the banking took a shape of online. Internet banking took a decent shape. People started transacting. They got a good trust over the online banking. There was a core banking in place, and people were started moving. Mobile banking also was kind of coming a reality, and then the things are started. Today in 2015, or the brick and mortar banking has actually, online banking has become a kind of brick and mortar banking, and the offline banking, that is the branch banking, has really kind of taken a backstage. This is a reality now. The transactions cost have drastically reduced, and the business models are moved from internet banking, mobile banking, and ATMs based banking to social media based banking, to more intelligent banking in the form of analytics, to more cost-effective banking in the form of cloud, maybe for specific applications, and so on and so forth. So if the business models are driving the way the banking has to be performed, if the business models are changing rapidly, as the world changes, Basant, as you suggested, then I'm sure the perimeter of the boundary is not restricted. The transactions or the intranet or the core banking infrastructure, which is to be on a traditional, the data center connected to the branches, today no more. Today my branches have taken a different shape. Today there are scenarios when through offline branches, people want to transact. Through social media, in a way my banking is moved one step forward. It means the data has moved Our data has crossed the traditional boundaries. The data exfiltration, infiltration scenarios have taken a different shape, different vectors, different form factors. Everything is increased. So, as a CISO or as information security professionals, are you want to facilitate this kind of banking? Or you want to be a kind of impediment and stop saying that, let us be conservative and let us not allow these kind of innovations in banking? I think that is one of the important questions. Perhaps the banking industry is going on a more advanced, more open, more flexible kind of scenarios, but not the cost of diluting the security posture. Then what does it mean? Am I contradicting myself? Perhaps no. So when I'm saying that, when I'm allowing or facilitating this kind of banking 3.0, it means I'm using a risk management framework in place whereby I'm allowing this banking 3.0. At the same time, there are certain enough compensating control in place, right? But they are compensating controls. They are not the actually controls which are meant to allow or deny specific situations or specific approaches. So when these kind of things are happening, then the threat landscape is also moving. So earlier in web banking 1.0, the threat was very limited, maybe kind of script kidding, basic stuff. When banking 2.0 online banking started in 2008-10 onwards, the risk related to phishing increased. When social media related banking started, the attack vectors have moved one step forward, whereby the people realized that why I'm really targeting a particular bank when I know that the bank are banking on a Facebook, when the banks are banking on a Twitter, the banks are banking even to some extent on other channels, right? So why can't I hit those channels to take away the customer data or to have a kind of financial benefits for myself? So we need to have our visibility or this plethora of channels which are driving the banking industry today. So when I'm speaking like this, then actually the threat vectors are moving, right? So what is fundamentally required? So the people aspect is there, the processes are there, so there is no changing from these traditional people process technology. But what is important is to make sure that I'm enabling, I'm facilitating the banking, but at the same time I'm making the do's and don'ts well sensitized or well aware to my consumers, to my communities. I think that is something the banking industry is driving rigorously to make sure that the people realizes these kind of innovative threats and trying to bring down the risk to a reasonable level, right? But to stop the risk, that is something, as Sachin rightly suggested, if somebody asks, how vulnerable we are, if somebody asks me, how secure we are, and believe me, these are the questions which were thrown at me, just as recent as 15, 20 days back. It's very difficult to answer. There is no silver bullet because the business models are very different. So the answer ideally would be reasonably we are secure. We are secure maybe better than the peers, right? But we are not 100% secure, but that is not banking.
So, Kalpana, there's a challenge now. Samir is saying we are better than the peers. And by peers, obviously, he means other than the banking industry. So sorry if I'm raging a war here, but I think the couple of points he made around technology is changing the way banking is being done. If I look at the capital markets particularly, I think technology has changed the way capital markets function as well. So where do you see yourself vis-a-vis banking? Do you accept Samir's challenge and say you're lagging behind? Or capital markets generally is lagging behind? Or what are the three things that you think we should be doing to make sure that we can catch up and say we are as mature from a security standpoint, the banking sector?
So while I say that, so it appears from my earlier, sharing that it looks like that financial services is less prepared. I don't think that. What I meant and what I continue to maintain is that the fundamentals are in place. If you're talking to me about a technology risk assessment framework, yes, it's there. Reviews, yes, they are there. the basic fundamentals in terms of being able to protect all the layered security basics are definitely there. However, I think what I'm referring to is the challenge posed by the SMAC technologies. Are we mature? Are the technologies or the security mechanisms to handle these technologies also mature enough? They're also maturing. And I'm giving you a very specific example. For example, on the mobility side, okay? We implemented BYOD and we have an MDM solution and we are about to implement MAM, and we mandate for every new technology adoption, the security people, the information security team is a part of the product design itself and is not a part of something which is done later. Despite that, the challenges that we face when every new app is rolled out and where a lot of information is being captured is still open. There's a lot of back and forth with the solution provider themselves to plug the gaps. Or for example, if I want to use a very mature, I mean a so-called mature, but a very, very popular collaboration suite, is it mature enough in terms of security? I still find gaps. And we have worked with technology teams, international teams of these large solution providers, and still pointed out gaps. So what I mean is that yes, fundamentals are in place. There is a good ecosystem. There's got a good bit of learning. But my worry is that, and I would always like to be a little more conservative to say that, am I prepared as financial services company to be ready with managing the advanced threats that can come? I am not so sure. And therefore, what we have now done is that we have taken on board third-party experts to come and help us to review what we are doing and not be complacent enough to say, okay, I think I'm doing it right, but I'm saying, okay, why don't you come and help us, evaluate us, and I want to keep doing this review all the time. So that's my take. And I would agree, definitely I would agree with Patrick and the banking sector, that definitely banking would have much more evolved security practices as compared to financial services. However, is it that financial services are very behind? I'm not so sure, because it's required now. Our business models are digital. There is no way we cannot be overlooking, there's no way we can be overlooking this. Maturity is still a question.
So coming to Durga, coming to you, we talked about maturity, and you talked about you have a number of companies with different level of maturity and maybe technology adoption. Where do you see the challenge to be from a security standpoint? What are your three top challenges, and how do you deal with them?
Yeah, before that, just I have a small take on whether a company is secured or not. Any kind of industry. I mean, if you draw a risk heat map of any business, let's say a bank, and tell the banks that make your credit risk zero, it is not possible. So they have to be out of the business to make the credit risk zero. So no organization, whatever business they are, I personally feel cyber security risk has to be at the top quadrant in the hit risk map. You only have to have your hit response plan, and who are the mitigation plan, and have a plan around how to mitigate the risk. Risk will always be there. So working towards reducing that risk to zero is something working towards be out of the business. That's what I personally feel. So I had a problem with, when I generated my risk heat map, I had shown that my cyber security risk is at the top. So I had certain problem that how can you bring down to the white? I told I can never bring down to white. It will always remain at the top. So that's what is my take. Coming to what are the three challenges which I am facing. One of the biggest challenges which I told is, see, all CISOs would be facing. I mean, facing that kind of challenge is something which, the professor was talking, and he told that we have been waiting for 4 months to patch a vulnerability. What's our 4 months? We have been waiting for 25 years to patch a vulnerability. That is Heartbleed. We have been into Heartbleed for the last 25 years. So we have been into that vulnerability. Just that somebody told that it's vulnerable, and there is a huge, furor in the organizations, they'll patch it, and then finally what happens during that time, lot of insecure things happen during that time. Lot of website will come up telling you, because you know, I mean, I'm actually a person who all through my life I walk the talk. I mean, suppose you have a big organizations and you have been asked that you patch all this hard-built vulnerability in 2 days time, and naturally you will pass on the command to the junior guys who would be doing this work. The first thing for them to identify which are vulnerable, and suddenly, I mean, nowadays the thought doesn't work and thought doesn't start unless you go to Google. Then you Google, then the Google tells that go to this site and give your IP address, you will find whether you are vulnerable or not. They go to the site, give the IP address, before they find vulnerable or not, they are hacked. So this is the kind of problem which happens in organizations. So what's really important is, I think is, most important thing is not really taking care that what is, it is inevitable that every day there will be new variant of threat would come. What is important is keeping ourselves secure is the endpoint control, which I feel that there is a massive proliferation of the endpoints. Endpoints is not today confined to only laptops. Endpoint is today and laptops, mobile, so many things. So making that secure is actually the fundamental aspect, and that is also a challenge to me today. Number one challenge. Number two challenge is we are not confined to ourselves. We are actually connected. I go back to, I mean, connected is something which today people are telling, but this has been there for the last 10 years. I just go back 10 years when I was a regulator, I was in RBI. I won't tell you what has happened, but some incident I will tell you. I will not name the organizations. We found a fraud in one organization. That fraud happened from a college, because that college, that engineering college website, web server was compromised, and some hackers from Russia got into that web server and get into the bank site and then created a problem. So we were connected. The thing that a lot of things are happening, then we are actually talking about that. So another thing is that think that we are a heterogeneous structure where a lot of people would be there, a lot of people would be using our system. We can't avoid that. So a framework of really managing that, what I mean, NCPIC and all are actually good endeavor. I must tell that that's something which should necessarily happen in India. That was one of the important things. And third thing which I told you, I have to tell third thing, I have to find a third thing. The third thing is the sharing of information. I'm good, Patrick told that sharing information started. Incidentally, I was in IDRBT long back, for 7 years I was in IDRBT. The talk of having such kind of a thing started from that time, that we should have something like IJAC, FS IJAC in US, we should start something. Now I was actually fortunate enough to visit FS IJAC to see whether we can implement the same thing in financial sector or not. But nothing happened. Good that same thing has happened now. And it can very well happen in the banking sector because there is a regulations. But in other sectors, still people are very, very careful about sharing threat information. So that's something which has to necessarily come, and that has to come through awareness sessions and conferences like this. Otherwise, it will not come. Unless there is a regulator, this thing, telecom it would come because there is a regulator, telecom it will come. Banking it will come because there is a regulator. Otherwise, it's a mindset problem. Why do I give my threats to another organizations? But they don't realize that gone are the days when one pharma company fails, another pharma company will celebrate. Today, if there is an attack to one pharma company, the another pharma company will get attacked the next day. So it is actually good information. That idea of sharing the information should actually come. And the how should come, and that's something which probably we should discuss.
Thanks, Durga. So if I look at the points that you mentioned around endpoint, that the digital, disappearing perimeter through the endpoint devices, etc., and talking about the awareness. I think when Patrick mentioned about the information sharing in the banking sector, it must have paid a lot of dividends to the banking sector. So, Patrick, do you want to talk about a couple of examples where that information sharing has helped kind of from a security standpoint, and how financial services sector generally can learn from that and implement?
Actually, about the weaknesses, Durga was talking about the endpoint. Yeah, endpoint is the thing that is actually the most vulnerable. But to fix the endpoint, what you need to do is, you need to tighten the nut in front of the endpoint. Very often, it is a human failure. Professor was talking about downloading binaries. I mean, there's absolutely no need why a bank teller needs access to the internet in the first place, right? So you need to fix the nut in front of the endpoint. So it should start there. So in the course of sharing information, all banks today have set up or are in the process of setting up a SOC. Now, one of the first benefits we see from the SOC is a SOC is able to identify bots. So once a bank identifies a bot, they are also able to identify which is the command control center that it is connecting to. That information is shared with the banks. And other banks are immediately able to block that connection, that outbound connection to that CNC. That's one immediate benefit we have seen of sharing this information. Then, of course, we inform this to CERT, who are able to fix it at the country level. Now, you talked about a perimeter. Today, for the country as a whole, we can think of a line of control. We can think of national boundaries, physical boundaries. So where is the digital boundary for the country? That is going to be the first thing. First, identify what is the digital boundary for the country, digital boundary for your organization, and then secure that. So if you don't do that, then your entire organization and naturally the entire country is vulnerable. So sharing of this information is now able to tell banks which are the areas which are vulnerable, which are the places who are actually engaged in this attack against the banks, so that we can block these things at the perimeter level itself. Get me? Yep. So identification and blocking of egress, that has helped all the banks because we set up this information sharing. Another thing, of course, is, in fact, by far the most number of incidents that are reported are phishing incidents, which is a great learning because we are able to see patterns in that phishing URLs. So that pattern again feeds into the bank's own SOC again, so that at the proxy level, today almost all banks access the internet only through a centralized proxy. So to that extent, defense has become easier. So at the proxy level, we are able to block those things, so that again, the egress of information is identified and blocked immediately. So I would say that these two are the biggest benefits. Then in the process of our learning from each other, we found that some of the banks are able to bring down a phishing site even before it becomes operational. All right? It's possible to do it. So again, by sharing information informally within the CISA forum, this is not something that we would like to document, but banks are able to stop these phishing sites even before they go into business. When it comes to phishing again, I just want to, because we have a wider audience here, see, classic targets for phishing are banks because that's where the money is. Also in the US, we find phishing attacking the e-commerce sites, because in the US, they have this principle of a credit card on record, right? Like your PayPal account. In India, we don't have it because we insist on a two-factor authentication for credit card transactions above a certain limit. So in India, e-commerce sites probably are not fertile ground for a phisher. But then I'm just thinking, what about people who maintain Demat accounts? Your NSDL, CSDL, and so on. If I can get hold of the user ID and password of the Demat account holder, can I access that and transfer some shares or sell some shares? If along with the bank account credentials, I also get the Demat account credentials, that's going to affect the securities industry massively. Insurance interest, for instance, if I can get again, because insurance also is now going into Demat form, if I see whose insurance is going to, say, mature in the next 1 week or so, and I access that Demat account, and I change the nominee's name to myself, change the account number to my own, on maturity, insurance will pay me. Okay? I mean, this is scary. But unless this kind of awareness comes, I don't think we can stop the crooks.
Sure. I think, Patrick, you raised some real points and real learnings. I think one of the things that you talked about, recognizing organizational boundaries. So before I open up for questions from the audience, Samir, I'll ask you one final question around, from a financial services standpoint, and not necessarily banking alone, how do you determine what is your digital boundary for an organization?
So my digital boundary is extended to a customer in a way. My digital boundary is there well up to my outsourced agencies for delinquency. My digital boundary is very much there for my credit card printing agency, my statement printing agency, right? My merchants, most important, right? Today, go to any retailer shop, and if you are issuer or acquirer, where your customers, for example, are transacting or swiping their card in a POS machine or in a PC POS machine, ultimately it is your customers' data which is getting transferred, processed, and stored. So how we are ensuring that that particular entity is secure? So that's what I said, you know, in my earlier deliberations. Today, the definition of digital boundary is very difficult. It's blurred in a way. And there is no line where I can say that, yes, my boundary ends here. The kind of model today we have, I have taken my banking to some extent on a Facebook, right? If Facebook is compromised, if there is a cross-site scripting attack on a Facebook, my client browser, which is vulnerable, might get exploited and that code might get injected into my machine, thereby making my endpoint vulnerable to keylogger attacks. It's as simple as that, right? So it's very difficult to say like this, but a due diligence, you know, a proper security assessment of all your those touch points or choke points. And the most important part, which I have been emphasizing in various forums, is I think the days are gone or days are going slowly of putting a lot of emphasis on preventive stuff. Because that's not where the industry lies. That's not where the business lies. The time has come of making your information security a successful model if you are able to detect the information security breaches within a stipulated time. If you are able to do that, I think you are a successful CISOs for the institutions. I think, right? So that's the most important, I think, takeaway, which the point of deliberations which we should have.
Thanks. And what I would do is probably I'll spend the next 5 minutes asking questions or asking audience to ask if they have any questions for the panel. Any questions? Yeah.
Can somebody pass on a mic to him?
Yes, so the question was kind of elaborate on the cyber drills which the IDRBT is doing.
Yeah, actually we have followed the model that Certain has done earlier for the banks. Basically, we set up one server, an application server, and ask banks to monitor that. So each bank has set up that application server in their premises, and we launched the attack from IDRBT. And they're supposed to detect, as Samir was saying, detection is the first step. So then we set up, of course, another IRC chat server so that they can talk to us instead of using the normal email. This environment is totally isolated from the organization's WAN. So it's a standalone LAN environment. Over the internet, we launch the attacks, and the other bank is supposed to detect that attack using whatever tools they have on their hand. The IPS, IDS, firewalls, whatever they have, they're supposed to detect it and report back to us. So this is how their awareness of detection increases, and we train teams of banks, usually 4 to 6 banks at a time, because we don't have the bandwidth to do so many banks together. So we set up a vulnerable application server and an IRC chat at the bank side, and we launched the attacks from IDRBT.
Yeah.
Sir, the whole security thing, we have. We have been talking about what happens at the backend side. Yeah, so we have been talking about everything at the backend side, that we need to do this prevention and everything. As Sir had said, that many things happen on the consumer's end, and due to human errors and all. So there has been an initiative which is on air these days by DBS Bank about ACT. So why don't we carry out such awareness within the people itself so that they are aware of the phishing attacks and also other kind of attacks which is done by human errors. So would that also fall into your dais that it should cover? As we see the Indian market, they are widespread. Like we have people from villages also who have their bank accounts. So we can have such a small video clips which can be done, like which can be installed at the local store or like the local banks. So how about these initiatives which can be done at the bank level from the security, like from the CISOs? So would that help secure the things?
So I think that's a fair comment, and I'll probably ask Samir if he wants to respond to that. But just to add to what you said, if I look at from a banking standpoint and some of the financial services standpoint, information security awareness, not only within the organization but outside, and especially to the consumers and the customers, is part of a mandatory requirement. So, for example, there are regulations which requires banks, for example, to spread awareness, and you will see a lot of these ads on newspapers and specific emailers. So are we doing it consistently and making sure that there is an impact, or do we know how much has been the impact? And I think we have a way to, a lot more to be done, but the programs are there in place for sure that I'm aware of. I mean, you want to add anything?
Well, I think I agree with you. So we have been also doing the security awareness through FM radios, through print medias, through electronic channels, even through Facebook to some extent, through emailers, through SMS. I think that goes on as a journey that should go on. But yes, there is always more to do, you know, because as more and more people bring under your umbrella from rural households and on as part of financial inclusion, I think the challenge is bigger. You know, in view of our 120 billion population. But yes, I think it has to be a collective effort, right? And all banks should do it more rigorously, and the people also need to be a kind of security conscious, security hygiene. That's how I think we'll have to take it forward.
I have one last
thank you, sir.
Can I add something here? See, creating information security awareness is first and foremost to be done within the organization. Do all the employees know about it? Second thing is the world at large. If you have an initiative, if you can make a video or ad or whatever it is, the Ministry of Consumer Affairs will get it published free of cost. All right?
Sir, I myself am into VAPT and I do AppSec, which and I work with the banks also. So that is what the point which you said about employees is really very important, that thing. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Okay. There are two questions I'll probably go.
My question, I've often seen banks and other organizations not really thinking of a user while formulating policies. For example, I'll give you one thing. Sometime a policy is saying that the password has to be very complex and needs to be changed frequently. Say once in 3 months, 6 months. What does it really imply? That I cannot remember my password, which implies that I have noted down somewhere. And as soon as I note it down, it is more vulnerable than something that I can remember. I do not know why people are not thinking through this. I've seen repeatedly, including stock exchanges, including many of the traders, insisting on things which just is going to really violate things much more than otherwise. The second, sitting on many, many committees, chairing many of these committees, I actually find a lot of things that are being talked about not really true. I think, yes, we have been lucky that we have not been hit hard. We are more looking at processes rather than, I think any time when you see audit is done, including your company which does auditing, very often, I see the process they go through and say, this violations. They rarely go to the root cause. The root cause is not analyzed often. Number two, when root cause is analyzed, and if somebody is found to have not done things right, rarely action is taken. So I mean, I'm seeing the other side of it. I see things being very, very vulnerable. And I'm sat on telecom boards, and I sit on some of the exchange boards and some of the banks boards, and I find the policy pretty much the same. I think we are lucky that we haven't been hit hard. And much of what you're saying is not helping, sort of saying, no, no, we are more secure.
Sure. Thank you very much, panelists. It was an interesting discussion. Just to conclude, I think we talked about there is an increasing level of awareness. There is a talk about how do we get ROI for the investment that we are making from a security standpoint. Having said that, we need to do a lot of work to define what digital boundaries would be. And as Professor said, we need to start thinking about how do we convert our thoughts into action, real action rather than just action on paper, and then kind of look at how do we manage the man-machine interaction much better by tackling the human issue rather than just the technology issue. With that, I'll close this panel discussion. Thank you very much. It was really interesting.
To all our panelists and our moderator for this very insightful session on how organizations can establish effective resiliency frameworks. It was really valuable to hear from you, your first-hand experiences, and your identifications of the gaps and best practices in this process. I'd now like to call upon Mr. Kirsi Tavadia to please present mementos to Mr. D.B. Dubey, CISO Reliance Group. Mr. Samir Ratolikar, Senior President and CISO, HDFC Bank. Ms. Kalpana Maniar, CIO, Edelweiss Securities. Mr. Patrick Kishore, COO, IDRBT. And Mr. Basant Shroff, Partner, Financial Services at Ernst & Young. We hope that you've found the session so far engaging. The issue of cybersecurity is one that we cannot afford to neglect in this day and age, and we hope that this conference provides the first steps towards filling the gaps in our knowledge and skills around this issue.